God of War is an action-adventure game developed by Santa Monica Studio and published by Sony Interactive Entertainment. It was released worldwide on April 20th, 2018 for PlayStation 4, with a Windows port released on January 14th, 2022. The game is the 8th installment in the God of War series, the 8th chronologically and the sequel to 2010's God of War 3. Unlike previous games which were loosely based on Greek mythology, this installment is loosely inspired by Norse mythology, with the majority of it set in ancient Scandinavia in the realm of Midgard. For the first time in the series, there are two protagonists, Kratos, the former Greek god of war, who remains the only playable character, and his young son, Atreus. Following the death of Kratos' second wife, Faye, Atreus' mother, the two embark on a journey to fulfill her request that her ashes be spread at the highest peak of the Nine Realms. Kratos keeps his troubled past a secret from Atreus, who is unaware of his divine nature. Along their journey, they come into conflict with monsters and gods of the Norse world. Described by creative director Cory Barlog as reimagining of the franchise, a major gameplay change in Kratos makes prominent use of magical battle axe instead of his signature double-chained blades. God of War also uses an over-the-shoulder free camera with the game in one shot, as opposed to the fixed cinematic camera of the previous entries. The game also includes role-playing video game elements, and Kratos' son, Atreus, provides assistance in combat. The majority of the original game's development team worked on God of War and designed it to be accessible and grounded. A separate short text-based game, A Call from the Wilds, was released in February 2018 through the Facebook Messenger and follows Atreus on his first adventure. 3 days before God of War's release, a smartphone companion app called Mimir's Vision was made available, providing additional information about the game's Norse setting. God of War received universal acclaim for its story, world design, art direction, music, graphics, combat system, and characters. In particular, the dynamic between Kratos and Atreus. Many viewers felt it had successfully revitalized the series without losing the core identity of its predecessors. It has been cited as among the greatest video games ever made, and was awarded Game of the Year by numerous media outlets and award shows. The game also performed well commercially, selling over 5 million units within the month of its release and 23 million sold by November 2022, making it the best-selling PlayStation 4 game and the best-selling game in the series. A novelization was released in August 2018, followed by a prequel comic series published from November 2018 to February 2019. A sequel, God of War Ragnarok, was released on November 9th, 2022 for PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5. The game's main protagonists are Kratos, now voiced by Christopher Judge, and his young son, Atreus, voiced by Sonny Shuljik. Kratos is a warrior originally from Sparta who became a Greek god of war and is the son of Zeus. After ending up in ancient Scandinavia following his war against the Olympians, he met his second wife, Lofi, addressed here as Faye, who died from an unknown cause shortly before the start of the game. She bore their son, Atreus, who at the start of the game does not know about Kratos' past or his divine nature, but can hear other beings' thoughts. The main antagonist is the Aesir god Baldur, played by Jeremy Davies, the half-brother of Thor, whose sons Modi and Magni, played by Nolan North and Troy Baker respectively, assist him. Baldur's parents are Odin, the All-Father and the King of Aesir, and Vanir Gardeners, Freya, played by Daniel Bestuti, the former queen of the Valkyries. Freya tried leaving Odin after he began corrupting her Vanir magic. He in turn stripped her of her Valkyrie wings, banished her to Midgard, and cast a spell on her that prevented her from causing harm to others and from leaving the realm. She then hid her identity under the alias, the Witch of the Woods, to protect her son from the prophecy that foretold of his death. Freya cast a spell of immortality on Baldur, which also prevented him from feeling pain or pleasure. The effects of the spell caused Baldur to greatly resent his mother. The only thing capable of harming him was a mistletoe, a fact which Freya kept sacred. Other characters include Mimir, played by Alistair Duncan, who claims to be the smartest man alive, and the Holdra brothers, Brock, Robert Craigshead, and Sindri, Adam J. Harrington, dwarves who appear at various points in the world and assist Kratos and Atreus by forging new gear. Weapons forged by the Holdra brothers include Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, who was used by the Aesir gods. They also forged Kratos' Lefanian axe, which originally belonged to Faye, who also gifted Kratos her guardian shield. The spirit of the Greek goddess Athena, played by Carol Rugger, makes a cameo appearance, and Zeus, played by Corey Burton, appears to Kratos as illusion in Helheim. Now, I remember fondly playing the original God of Wars when I was a child, and I absolutely loved them, and I could always recall Kratos wielding his double-chained fiery blades with such vigor and viciousness. And it was just one of the parts of the game that I thoroughly enjoyed playing. Kratos, of course, was such a multi-dimensional, fascinating character to play with, and you always enjoyed the experience. In saying that, though, I was somewhat skeptical When I saw the plotline for this game being played out, I didn't know if I'd like the idea of Kratos having a son, and I didn't really understand why the story had been moved to Scandinavia rather than its traditional Greek setting. But I'm happy to say that I was entirely wrong, and what the game makers have done here is create a new sphere for God of War to play out in. The relationship between Kratos and Atreus is absolutely spellbinding to watch play out, as these two sort of love each other but don't really understand each other. And Kratos is by no means a natural father, but he does try his best to care for his son. In what overall is a very dramatic and violent and heavy game, it is nice to just have this human touch, and sometimes comic relief can be found between Kratos' curtness and Atreus' naivety at times. Having the addition of Atreus shows a side of Kratos we've never seen before, an emotional side, a human side. And that, combined with the rage and pain that you see in his constant conflict with his health, is now brought out as a desire to protect his son and to teach him the ways of the world. And Atreus is such a well-written character. He doesn't fall into the annoying child archetypes, but instead we find a young man trying to understand his place within the world. I also love the later addition of Mimir. He just adds an intellectual element to the game with his wonderful stories and comedic touches. Look, to say this game is tough is an understatement. In terms of the combat modes, it is very complicated, and you really have to develop your skills, as it were, in order to progress through the complicated storyline. Even though initially I was disappointed for Kratos not to be using his familiar blades, I really became so fond of the axe, as it's mechanically fascinating, and it really now works perfectly within this realm. It's a well-balanced and entertaining tool of destruction, and emphasizes a more sort of calculated style of combat. I also enjoyed now using Atreus to help you in your fights, and it's just a clever addition to the already complicated combat sequences. The characters are layered and nuanced, and of course the story, drawing from the wonderful Norse mythology stories, is just compelling, intense, and introspective. You can see that the writers were well researched and understood their source material very well. This game, however, though, is for an expert player. If you're not a proficient gamer, as it were, you might struggle getting through some of the harder fight sequences, and some of these sequences are just incredibly tough and very, very demanding, and you have to repeat them over and over again, which can be somewhat frustrating. One of my grievances maybe was the map of the games, that although as a player you have freedom to explore it can be difficult to track Kratos' position. I also felt the fast travelling system could be weirdly strange at times, as it opened up too late in the game. And a lot of the game you have to explore it by foot or by boat, so it can take some time to get around the map. All in all though, this is a fantastic game with one of the best and most iconic characters in gaming history, and a wonderful way now to add another layer to this complex and fascinating character of Kratos is the addition of Atreus, and it really works so well when it could have really just been such a disaster. Moving the story now to Norse mythology was also a clever move in hindsight, and like I said, using the axe now as the main competitive weapon was also a very clever touch in hindsight. All in all, this makes for a fantastic addition to the God of War series, and frankly one of the best within the series, and I cannot wait to play God of War Ragnarok. God of War gets a 8.5 out of 10.